Morning. Morning. We've been clear since Inauguration Day that public safety is our administration's top priority. And in our first full day of office, I met with Attorney General Anthony Brown and U.S. Attorney Eric Barron in the State House to discuss our strategy for public safety. 6 months later, I stood with my cabinet in this room, and we made very clear our shared vision for the future of public safety in our state. When it comes to public safety, we aren't going to point fingers. We aren't going to just simply place blame while homicide rates increase. We're going to lead, and we're going to lead together. We've announced an all-of-the-above approach to public safety. We said that our success would depend on the participation of every single Marylander. And today, we're here to discuss our continued partnership and our aggressive approach to be able to keep Marylanders safe. I'm pleased to stand with this remarkable team. We're joined by cabinet secretaries, we're joined by law enforcement, we're joined by state's attorneys, we're joined by the Attorney General, we're joined by our federal partners, we're joined by members of the Maryland General Assembly, and also advisors across the public and the private sectors, and we've got a lot to share this morning. But before we talk about the work ahead, I want to take a moment to highlight the work that we've already done. In year one, we knew that we had to create a new culture of collaboration. We made the choice to trust and support the people who were doing the work on the ground. We made the choice to stand with law enforcement, to stand with state's attorneys, with public defenders, with federal partners, and those who are doing violence reduction work in our communities. And we chose to give them the resources that they need. We made the choice to forge bonds across executive agencies, to nurture partnerships with village elders, and reach out to everyone with a vested interest in keeping our community safe. We made the choice to grow opportunities so our kids, and particularly those who are growing up in our most challenged communities, can contribute to society instead of resorting to crime in order to survive. We invested $122 million in funding for local police departments and signed legislations to get illegal guns off of our streets. We expanded the Office of the Attorney General by securing and supporting 66 new full-time positions, including positions in the Criminal Investigations Division. We secured $11 million for the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center, the governor's #1 tool for intelligence collection and intelligence sharing across the state. We secured $7 million for more staff in the Public Defender's Office. Public Defender's great to see you. And $7 million to our state's attorneys, who've been doing remarkable work on this issue, including $5 million for the state's attorney, including $5 million for Baltimore City's state's attorneys. We delivered $2 million to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I'm proud that Maryland is one of the only states in the country to provide direct support to our U.S. Attorney. And on top of everything I mentioned, we secured strategic investments to expand education, to end child poverty, and to build stronger pathways to prosperity. And the results that we've collectively achieved are undeniable. We've proved to the state that we can bring down violent crime. We've proved to the state that we can reduce non-fatal shootings. We've proved to the state that we can break the cycle of 300+ homicides in Baltimore City each year. Amen. Yep. And I highlight this work and this progress not to indicate that our work is done, because it is not. I highlight the progress because it means that by working together, we can actually make change. This year, we are going to continue to use every tool at our disposal to ensure that people can and should feel safe in their communities. We're going to make use of the budget. We're going to make use of executive orders. We're going to make use of the data. We're going to make use of the partnerships with our U.S. Attorney, with our Attorney General, with our state's attorneys, with advocates, and local law enforcement. And we're going to use the legislative process through bills that we introduce and through bills that we will help shape in partnership with the General Assembly. We plan to introduce 3 bills focusing on public safety this session. The first, we will introduce the Victims' Compensation Reform Act. This bill and I want to thank the work and the partnership that we've had with the legislature, with advocates, also with state's attorneys Bates and Braithboy on this bill. This bill will ensure that victims of crime can count on support when they need it most. Yes. When people feel safe and feel like justice will be served, then we have a better chance of getting convictions and actually closing cases. And by forging stronger bonds with victims of crime, we can help break the cycles of violence in our communities. And that's why this bill matters. Second, we will introduce the Growing Apprenticeships in Public Safety, also called the GAPS Act. Law enforcement is vital to the safety of our communities. We have a responsibility to recruit, train, and retain quality law enforcement officers. This legislation will build stronger pipelines to law enforcement jobs for all Marylanders, even those who do not pursue a 4-year college degree. And as we contend with workforce shortages across our public safety agencies, this bill will help us get more boots on the ground and help us to keep the boots that we already have. Third, we will introduce a bill to create a new Center for Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention in the Maryland Department. We have got to confront this inexcusable fact that 75% of all homicides in Maryland are committed with a gun. This is a public safety crisis, but it's also a public health crisis. We need to get these illegal guns off of our streets, and we will. Amen. And this legislation marks an important step forward to making that happen. Just a few months ago, President Biden created the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And that office is led by representatives who are here in this room today. The Biden White House recommends that states create their own offices of gun violence prevention. And today, Maryland is choosing to assert its leadership in that space and in that role. Now, I also know there are going to be robust debates this session about juvenile justice. And our administration will be an active participant in those conversations. We need to think seriously about lengthening probation for juveniles guilty of gun crimes. Because that way we give juveniles the additional time to complete necessary rehabilitation programs. I also support moving more crimes related to illegal guns from misdemeanors to felonies. I support reforms that actually use data that shows that it can reduce crime. And the hallmark of what I hope to see in any juvenile justice legislation that's going to make it to my desk can be summarized in one word: accountability. We need accountability for the kids that are repeatedly violating the law. I believe in rehabilitation, but I will not tolerate lawlessness. Amen. We need accountability for For the young person who picks up a handgun and threatens the safety of their neighbors, you cannot destroy the lives of other people and believe there will be no consequences. We need accountability for the small number of young adults who commit the most heinous crimes. Repeat violent offenders need to know that any sense of invincibility that you might feel, it will be short-lived. Accountability also, though, must mean holding ourselves to account. Because when a kid does something wrong, they need to be held accountable. But so do the adults responsible for preventing and responding to those situations. It means holding local government partners and law enforcement accountable for curbing violence. It means holding our social services and our school systems accountable for helping our youth break the cycles of crime. It means holding our nonprofit and our business partners accountable for providing pathways to prosperity. It means holding our families accountable for nurturing the dreams and the aspirations of our youth. It means holding state leadership accountable for following the data and implementing proven policies that work. And it means holding our Department of Juvenile Services accountable too. Amen. When we entered office last year, there was a measure of brokenness in the Department of Juvenile Services. Morale was low, vacancies were high. Leaders from both sides of the aisle, throughout our communities, were frustrated with a department that was not meeting its mission. Now, we still have a lot of work to do. But if there's anyone who is up to the job, it's our Secretary of Juvenile Services, Vinnie Schiraldi. He's the right person for this moment. And you'll hear from Vinnie in just a few moments about the work that he's doing. And the thing that makes Vinnie the right leader for this moment is this. He recognizes that if children break the law, and we put them into a system that does not give them the resources that they need for a better path, then we are doing it wrong. Yes. He recognizes that if children break the law and we put them into a system that makes them more likely to commit a crime, we are doing it wrong. I understand accountability, and I demand it. Secretary Schiraldi understands accountability, and he demands it. And everybody around this podium understands accountability, and we demand it. And by working with social service providers, with the remarkable men and women of law enforcement, with judges and advocates and families, and our partners in the General Assembly, we can keep making powerful progress to ensure that Maryland is a safe state. It takes a village to raise a child. And it will take a village to build safer communities. So that everyone who has been a partner in this effort and who holds themselves accountable for being part of the solution and not just talking about the problem, we see you, we appreciate you, and we need you. To our friends in the Maryland Violence Prevention Coalition who are here today. To our friends in the Maryland Equitable Justice Collaborative who are here today. We see our state's attorneys, both in this room and the ones who are working hard all across the state. On this day of Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, we see each and every Marylander who raised their hand to serve in law enforcement and keep our communities safe. We're not resting until we get this right. This is the priority. And so to all Marylanders who are tuning in, know that we will stop at nothing to ensure your safety. To people with guns who wish to do harm to our communities, know we will stop at nothing to remove you from our neighborhoods. To those who are utilizing and brutalizing our children and having them do their dirty work, know that accountability is coming for you too. This is the time where together we can get this right. And we will. So now I will turn the program over to our Secretary of Labor, Portia Moore.
Thank you, Governor. As the Governor said, a key part of protecting our communities is making sure there are boots on the ground. Yet a large and growing number of these critical public safety jobs are going unfilled. If we don't act now, there will be thousands of vacancies in law enforcement and related public safety roles in the next couple of years. We need officers who reflect the diversity of our great state, and we need them to come from the neighborhoods they serve. These are dangerous jobs. Officers put their lives on the line every single day to protect our communities. But they're also family supporting jobs with good pay and benefits. That's why it's doubly important that doors to these opportunities be accessible to young people across our state. The GAPS Act is well named because we are seeing a potential gap, would address our state's growing workforce need through a key strategy that the Governor has already championed, which is registered apprenticeship. Across our state, we're expanding apprenticeships to more professions, more jurisdictions, and more young people. And we know this learn and earn strategy already works in law enforcement. Just this morning, the Maryland Apprenticeship Training Council approved a new apprenticeship through the Charles County Sheriff's Office. The GAPS Act will build on these successes. It will unlock existing resources, providing additional flexibility and greater incentives for apprenticeships in law enforcement and public safety jobs. This will enable us to attract the best and the brightest in our state to these important roles. Maryland Department of Labor looks forward to working with our partners in the General Assembly to ensure passage of the GAPS Act, and I thank the Governor for making it a priority on his legislative agenda. I'll now pass the podium to Clyde Boatwright, President of the Maryland Fraternal Order of Police.
Thank you, Secretary Wu. Again, good morning. Again, my name is Clyde Boatwright, and I'm the President of the Maryland State Fraternal Order of Police. Our organization represents over 21,000 police officers statewide. Today, we support the Moore-Miller administration's proposed GAPS Act legislation. The GAPS Act will provide much-needed assistance to public safety agencies that administer a cadet program. Cadet programs have shown themselves to be a great feeder system to agencies that develop young people who have an interest in a public safety career. The formulation of a work group on growing engagement in the law enforcement workforce will consist of professionals from various backgrounds that will take a deep dive into the recruitment and the retention of law enforcement professionals. Statewide mental health and wellness, statewide mental health and wellness policies are essential for establishing uniform standards for agencies to follow. Peer support, stress management, and other wellness programs are national best practices in our profession. It is no secret. In law enforcement, we have a recruitment and retention crisis, and the GAPS Act will assist agencies in replenishing the ranks and maintaining the law enforcement professionals already serving. We thank the Moore Miller administration for their leadership in this important work, and I will now introduce Secretary Herrera Scott.
Good morning. Thank you, President Boatwright, and thank you, Governor Wes Moore and your administration for these exciting announcements that will improve the lives and safety of Marylanders. The Maryland Department of Health is honored to be part of the solution. The cornerstone of our work in public health is prevention. The best way to address gun violence is to prevent it from ever happening in the first place. The current statistics speak for themselves. Over 2,200 Marylanders are injured or killed each year by a firearm, with almost 1/3 of firearm injuries being fatal. Between 2013 and 2022, the number of Marylanders under 18 years old wounded in non-fatal shootings quadrupled. Over the same period, the number of youth homicide victims under 18 years old increased by 62%. It is imperative to build into government the tools needed to prevent and intervene in gun violence through a public health approach. We believe researching and implementing prevention and intervention strategies are the key to saving lives. A public health framework for addressing gun violence utilizes strategies that identify root causes and common threads across multiple forms of violence by connecting the dots, using data to drive decision-making, and implement evidence-based strategies and partnerships with communities. Moving in partnership, the Department of Health has already made strides to address community violence, hospital-based violence, and youth violence. We've made it our mission to assemble as many pathways as possible for people to get help, including access to 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. We've developed a firearm safe storage and youth suicide prevention guide to educate the public and dangers of unsecured firearms. In February, the department is hosting the second annual Taking Care of Us Roundtable event in partnership with the Black Mental Health Alliance to bring attention to the increasing number of suicides among young African American men and women. And Maryland Medicaid, as of July 1st, will be providing reimbursement for community violence prevention services. Bringing the Center for Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention under the Maryland Department of Health is a natural evolution of this ongoing work. Consolidating these efforts under the department creates a centralized structure to accelerate meaningful progress through the lens of public health. It is our responsibility and our duty to define and monitor the problem, reduce risk, increase resilience, and ensure widespread adoption of evidence-based effective strategies across our state in partnership with our sister agencies and the communities. We will look for inspiration from our federal partners in the U.S. Department of Justice and the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. We want to bring these results to Maryland to protect our friends, our families, and our children. And we want to bring these results so that no one is left behind. I am pleased to now introduce Rob Wilcox, Special Assistant to President Biden, to deliver remarks. Thank you.
Hello, I am Rob Wilcox. I'm the Deputy Director of the White House Office for Gun Violence Prevention. And I'm joined here today with my fellow Deputy Director, Greg Jackson, because today is a big announcement. And we know how important it is to saving lives. Thank you to Governor Moore for the invitation to speak today in support of the bill to create a new Center for Firearm Prevention and Intervention. And thank you for his leadership to take all the necessary steps to address this epidemic, this public health crisis. Looking around the room, I'm sure everyone here has been touched by gun violence, myself included. I still remember 22 years ago when a family member was shot and killed. I can still see myself sitting at that funeral as the dust is rising up and I hear the music playing, and you think, will things ever change? And I can tell you 22 years ago, there was not a single Office of Gun Violence Prevention in this country. And now, that glimmer of hope, that glimmer of belief that we could have safer communities is becoming reality thanks to the leadership of Governor Moore. From suicides to domestic violence to mass shootings to everyday community violence, our communities are being torn apart. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for children in America. And as President Biden says, this is not normal. President Biden is doing all he can to address this public health crisis by focusing on proven solutions that invest in people, invest in communities, while taking action to crack down on gun trafficking, on illegal guns, and to keep guns away from people in crisis. He's taking more executive actions than any president in history. He's led the way in passing the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first major gun safety law passed in nearly 30 years. A law that has funded the hiring and training of 14,000 new school counselors, 500 who will be in the state of Maryland. A law that's led to over 250 new gun trafficking prosecutions to stem the flow of illegal guns. A law that's led to the increased denials of background checks for 18, 19, 20-year-olds by 25% because instead of just relying on a background check and a computer, NICS now calls into states and local law enforcement to get the information they need, and a law that invests $250 million in community violence intervention. This law and the executive actions do a lot, But what we need is partnership. What we need is an ecosystem where the federal government and its agencies has partners at the state level, partners at the local level, so we can make sure important funding dollars and enforcement priorities get to where they need to go. And that's why President Biden established the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. He gave us 4 key tasks. He wants us to implement the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. He wants us to identify new executive actions. He wants us to build the first ever FEMA-style response to mass shootings and concentrations of gun violence, so that even if we can't stop every act of gun violence, we can respond and support survivors when they need it the most. And lastly, he asked us to partner with state and local leaders. And that's why we're here today, to support the leadership of Governor Moore in creating the state-level Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Just last month, our office, in partnership with Vice President Harris, convened 100 legislators from nearly 39 states to launch the Safer States Agenda. This agenda wasn't just about what states had to do, it's about opportunities for partnership. Step 1, establish a state office of gun violence prevention so that we have points of contact. We have the ability to work with a state-level office that has the same ability we do, breaking down silos, investing in proven solutions, and ensuring that we're tackling gun violence in all its forms. Step 2 was supporting survivors, making sure they have the resources they need, trauma-informed care, so that they can recover from the trauma that took everything from them. We have to fund evidence-based solutions, community violence intervention, suicide prevention, lifeline, law enforcement that's looking to increase clearance rates so that we're solving homicides and non-fatal shootings. We need responsible gun ownership so guns are securely stored. We need the background check system that will work, and we have to hold the gun industry accountable. But the first item on that list was establishing a statewide Office of Gun Violence Prevention. It's the first because a statewide office leads to effective prevention and intervention and response, because it allows for an all-of-government strategy to implement policies and programs. It's a critical step to focus investments and drive the strategies that we know will save lives. And I can tell you, from the job that we have, that one of the most essential components of an effective Office of Gun Violence Prevention is leadership from the top. And that's what Maryland has with Governor Moore. A leader who is going to push all in to make sure that we have that statewide office to coordinate the response that we need. We're encouraged by today's groundbreaking announcement. We support the bill, and I can tell you, this isn't the first time Maryland's been on the front lines of gun violence prevention. It's leaned forward on enacting common sense provisions when it comes to secure storage, when it comes to investment, when it comes to making sure that survivors have the resources they need. Simply put, these actions together will save lives. We are so proud to be here with Governor Moore, as Maryland is the first state to act on the recommendation to create a statewide Office of Gun Violence Prevention since Vice President Harris convened state legislators last month. The first state to take action. That is leadership in action. And as we will be here to work with Maryland and every single state and U.S. territory as they undertake the ambitious but necessary effort to end gun violence as we know it, we can't be prouder to thank Governor Moore for his leadership, and we look forward to the continued partnership as you move forward with this office. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you all here, and it's great to look out on this room full of prosecutors, lawyers, defense attorneys, advocates, life coaches, and not to forget my DJS case managers who are in the room. It's a great day. Thank the Governor for his... And survivors. Thank you very much. Problem when you do lists, you'll always mess up. So I want to thank the Governor for his leadership on this critical issue. It's great to be part of an all-of-government approach and partnership with the community to address public safety. Today I'll be discussing some problems we encountered when I first arrived at DJS, what we're doing to address them, including the groundbreaking Thrive Academy, all part of the Governor's comprehensive effort to reduce violence in our communities. But first I want to say, take DJS's role in promoting safety and positive youth outcomes very seriously. No one should feel unsafe walking in their own neighborhood. Hard stop. Preventing crime before it happens and rehabilitating kids while holding them accountable is a balanced approach that builds safety much better than after-the-fact punishment. Maryland incarcerates more young people in adult prisons than all but 3 states, and 90% of those children are youth of color. So if simply locking kids up with adults was the solution, we'd already be feeling much safer than we are. Instead, we need to better engage young people while holding them accountable, as the governor said, both to stop them from committing crimes and to protect them from the crimes of others. As the governor, Secretary Herrera Scott, and Mr. Wilcox have discussed, gun violence is of the utmost importance to people across our state where such violence is far too prevalent. That's why I'm grateful for today's public safety proposals, and that last year, Governor Moore provided $5 million focused on a Safe Summer initiative. Over the past decade, funding for community programs to help rehabilitate DJS youth was cut substantially. Programs for youth in custody were sorely lacking, and DJS forged few meaningful partnerships. Combined with the impact of the pandemic, particularly on young people, that has us digging out of a hole to build up services for youth. That's why we're focusing like a laser on the young people in our care at the highest risk of gun violence. Borrowing from the successful group violence reduction strategies employed around the country, including very successfully in West Baltimore, DJS became the first juvenile justice agency to apply GVRS to system-involved youth when we launched the Thrive Academy in Baltimore on September 1st. Working with the Annie E. Casey Foundation and the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform, with funding from the Able Foundation, we analyzed 30,000 case files of DJS youth over the last 3.5 years, and also gathered human intelligence from police, community members, DJS staff, public defenders, and prosecutors to forecast youth at the highest risk of gun violence. Once selected, each Thrive youth is paired with a specialized case manager and a life coach with lived experience in the justice system, people who have often walked in the very same shoes as those young people. We then meet with the youth and their parents to clearly explain the ramifications of gun violence. You could go to prison, you could harm others, you could come to harm yourself. This is not just a lecture, because then we help the youth develop a life plan that provides them with a pathway from gun violence, away from gun violence, like you spoke about, Governor, and are in frequent contact to assure that they stay traveling on that. So it's not just a plan and walk out the door. The life coaches are seeing them constantly. Thrive youth are also provided with what we call a suitcase for success that's individualized to each kid's needs and may include stipended employment or service opportunities, assistance with going to college or vocational training, confidential relocation assistance for youth and families who themselves are in danger and can no longer live where they are living, and fiscal incentives for participation and achieving agreed upon milestones. While it's early so far, the 33 youth in Thrive from Baltimore City and Baltimore County that have been in it over the last 4 months, none have been involved in a gun-related incident. Today we'd like to thank the Pull-Up Fund for helping us expand Thrive into Prince George's County this month. And then next month, Thrive will expand into Anne Arundel County. 85% of the gun violence against Maryland's young people occurred in these 4 jurisdictions last year, 85%. Thrive will be statewide by the end of the fiscal year. In addition to Thrive, and in partnership with the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services and the Department of Human Services, we're working to identify Maryland's neighborhoods with the highest concentration of our shared clients to provide youth and families services in an innovative and collaborative way in those communities. This way, we're not serving kids in isolation, but together working to help youth and their families to live in healthier and safer communities. To continue creating solutions, we've strengthened partnerships with system stakeholders. We're working collaboratively with police, juvenile courts, state's attorneys, victims, and public defenders, survivors, and public defenders on a range of issues, from expanding community programs to better intake procedures to improving restitution practices. The juvenile justice system was created because research and experience tell us that young people are not just smaller versions of adults. They're not yet fully mature, their brains are still developing, and we have a real opportunity to improve their life trajectories. We must pursue two notions simultaneously: holding young people accountable for wrongdoing while helping them get back on track, all in an effort to improve public safety. That's what Thrive's all about. Thank you for your time. I'm going to turn it back over to the
I think it's time for questions.
Thank you. More. Juvenile services, as you know, has been a major topic throughout our executive. And the House Judiciary Committee held some briefings this fall. One thing that was revealed is the children in need of supervision. Some jurisdictions have filled out process forms, some have not. Will there be a push from you all, sir, and Ms. Barright, you speak on it as well, you talked about it in one of the hearings. Will there be a push to ask for law enforcement agencies, social service providers, educators, to fill out these forms to help out young people?
Yes, across the board. We have to, when we talk about what does it mean to rebuild a juvenile service section, it really means having all hands on deck to be able to support our young people. Where we believe that we believe in rehabilitation, we believe in giving young people an opportunity to be rehabilitated. We also, though, believe in accountability. We also know that there are some young people that, with the actions that they have shown, in some cases, particularly the repeat violent offenders, that they have to be dealt with specifically, and there needs to be measurements of accountability. But we are asking an all hands on deck to come in and be able to support the work for DJS to ensure that all of our young people can get the supports they need to become valuable and productive citizens in our society.
Governor, to follow up on that, is there any movement by your administration to put funding into those services that I have been hearing from service providers have been gutted during the pandemic? And when will we see those proposals if you're considering that?
Yes, you'll see. We're having our full budget rollout. That's going to be happening within a few days. But you will see, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to use every tool at our disposal to be able to help to address this issue of public safety, and that includes the legislative process, that includes executive orders, and yes, it absolutely includes the use of the budget.
Governor, one of the things you've talked about is this accountability issue. And to be quite candid with you, there's been very little accountability from your predecessors and others. I want to know what measurement and what kinds of measurement tools will you be using in order to say, hey, we're moving in a direction as opposed to standing still and or backsliding.
Thank you. And I can tell you that the posture that we have for this administration, we're not pointing fingers, we're not placing blame. It's not useful, it's not productive, and oftentimes I feel like that is a tool that is used for those who don't want to take accountability for the problem. We are choosing to lean in and say, when we talk about accountability, that does mean for the young people, but also it means for all of us as well. And so when we talk about the measurements and the tools that we are going to look at, it will include things like the tools that we all mentioned before, looking at everything from violence rates, homicide rates, non-fatal
Recidivism and all of that.
recidivism, all the core tools that we know. But we also, though, think it's important to be able to get also just a better understanding from the people in our communities. Because do they feel safer? Do they feel more seen? Do they feel like the young people who are involved in trouble are getting the supports that they need? And do they feel like the young people who they are repeatedly seeing as particularly the violent offenders in their community, do they feel that there's appropriate measurements of accountability? Because the thing that I know, and again, I'm new to politics, but I'm not new to communities. And I know that when we talk about how people feel in communities, we can talk about the data, and all that matters. But what fundamentally is going to matter is, do people feel safe in their neighborhoods and in their communities? Do people feel like there's appropriate measurements of support and appropriate measurements of accountability? And so we are looking at this both from a how are we using data and adding quantifiable, qualitative statistics, but it also is the quantitative, making sure that people feel a sense of community connection and belonging and safety in the neighborhoods they call home.
Governor, talking about working with partners and hearing the proposals from some of the state's attorneys, I know you talked about the importance of looking at probation length for some juveniles. One of the other proposal ideas from at least two state's attorneys was revisiting the Child Interrogation Protection Act. Do you support that as well?
I think all options need to be on the table. And I think as we're going into this next legislative session, we are going to work with our state's attorneys. We're going to work with our legislative partners. I think that we have to be clear that if we are not keeping an open eye and a real clear lens on how we're making communities more safe, then we are going to continue having a process where we're just pointing fingers. And so I think all options need to be on the table. And the core thing that I'm looking for is just simply this, accountability. Anything that makes it to my desk, it needs to make sure there's accountability that is attached to it.
From your administration, though, would you push to support making changes to that act?
I think all options need to be on the table. Yes.
Captain, will you speak?
Thank you. First, I'd like to say that as a man who played both sides of this is 18 years of this body, I'm just overwhelmed. I want to say thank you because the day you have made a decision to save a lot of black young men and women lives, and for that,
Well, you can't say that and then ask me to answer the question.
how is your provision piece is going to play in effect with helping me make sure I get the tools that I need to reach out and help this demand action towards me.
Thank you. First, I appreciate what you said about your grandmother looking down with a sense of pride on me. I just wanted to let you know she's looking down on you with a sense of pride. And we appreciate you. And when we say that this has to take a village and it will take a village, we mean that. It means that we need to have everyone from the people whose job it is to work in this space and people who understand that them working in this space is their assignment. Right? Their assignment to be active and engaged and involved in the lives of every single one of our young people, and that includes the village elders. And so I think there's a few different things that you'll see when it comes to our posture. One is we take outreach and work with our community partners very, very seriously. I mean, if you look at the work that Secretary Shirali was talking about the $5 million that went towards the Safe Summer Initiative, who are our partners in the Safe Summer Initiative? Community organizations, the ones who are on the ground. Because those who are closest to the problem are the ones who are closest to the solutions. They're just hardly ever at the table. Right? So we have to change our posture when it comes to working with community organizations. The second thing is that, and you'll see from the work that we have done, we spoke a little bit about the work that we've done to fund our state's attorneys, the work that we've done to fund the U.S. attorney, the work we've done to fund the public defender and the attorney general. But we also important to mention the work that's being done to support the community organizations. Because making sure that you are getting the supports that you need in order to advance the work becomes crucial and becomes important in that as well. So when we say that this means that everybody needs to have a measure of accountability and a measurement of belonging and involvement inside this work, that's exactly what we mean. Thank you.
Thank you.
My people Baltimore, I used to belong to the colleagues and also the crowd chaplain in Baltimore. Several things, I had the pleasure to talk to
that I'm first one and break his camp. Until our young people's home and souls are healed, we cannot, begin to even help them. That's the forever Japanese birds, as we all know. My nephew, I had one great work at the Lighthouse here in Annapolis. He was a drug kingpin down here in Annapolis. He's now 50 people. He took 35 years for God to heal a hole in his soul. He also got shot in Annapolis when he was like 17. The bullet still in his chest. But I wanted to ask you, I was willing to, my daughter's actually on 18 and 89 days. She's 6 months old and her precious drug, my only son got killed by sexual violence. I had 6 other members of all loved ones killed by over 7 other loved ones were wounded and survived. I want to ask you, in Lloyd's Mall, can we direct a sacred monument for families to come out here to the Maryland and hear the silence and just be through the apple now, with the first time coming out and for that statue?
First, let me say this: is that the pain you feel is so unfair. It's not fair for you to have to go through this much pain and this much anguish. It's not fair for you to have to deal with this much heartbreak and this much heartache. And part of the whole point of what we're talking about now is, truthfully, while we're inspired by the fact that you have turned your pain into purpose, it's not a fair ask. And our job is to make sure that in this time, that we have fewer and fewer and fewer families who have to have your testimony. That's the point. By God's grace. That's the point. And so, let's touch base afterwards about the best way to commemorate. But I want to tell you that we're anxious to be your partners on this work.
Thank you all.